Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us for this one are the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and the Times football reporter Charlotte Duncker. Welcome to you both. Let's just run you through the back pages. As you would expect, plenty leading the way with Gareth Southgate's future. The Express with the headline "Potluck," with ex-Chelsea boss Graham Potter favourite to take over if Southgate does go. Back page of The Guardian also leads with potential replacements, and on the right-hand side, Barney Ronay with a piece saying the FA's task is simple: do everything to get Jurgen Klopp, plus an interview with Rory McIlroy, who said that Rafa Nadal and Michael Jordan reached out after his US Open heartbreak. Into the Telegraph front page with how in contention to succeed Gareth Southgate. And on the Sun, similar names in the frame: Took and go. Thomas Tuchel, once of Chelsea too, has an eye on Gareth Southgate's job, but he will do battle, they say, with Howe and Potter. And into the Eye, the champions arriving home, reigning Spain, all safely off the plane, and Southgate to speak with the FA before he decides on his future. We will kick off then with The Guardian, who have two parts to the potential search for a new England manager on the front of their sports section. Who's next? Tuchel, Howard, Potter on the shortlist if Southgate quits, says Jacob Steinberg. And then that sidebar that says FA's task is simple: do everything to get Klopp. We'll get to that maybe in just a moment. But first, Charlotte, Thomas Tuchel, particularly Eddie Howe and Graham Potter, would they seem like two very, very strong candidates if it came to it?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, when you look at the outstanding candidates, we don't obviously know that Gareth Southgate is going to resign as it stands. I think a lot of people are expecting it. It seems like we've come to the end of the cycle with Southgate, doesn't it? But I think those names that you've mentioned there, that obviously high pedigree, brilliant managers, maybe play more of the attacking style of football that a lot of fans and pundits have been crying to see from England. But I think whoever comes in to take over from Gareth Southgate, they're set for a huge, massive task. If you look at what he's achieved with England, I know there are a lot of critics against him, but whoever comes in, they're going to be expected with that squad to go and win the World Cup. Now, they've got to adapt to that team. They've got to bring in new tactics. Everyone's crying out for them to play more exciting, dynamic, attacking football. So if you look at those three names there, if you look at Eddie Howe, for example, he's at Newcastle, is doing really well there. Is he going to want to leave an established job where he's building under a project there to go somewhere where if you don't win, you're automatically a failure? It's going to be a big test for him if he wants to do that. Obviously, we know that Graham Potter is out of work, and Thomas Tuchel is an option as well, because the FA aren't just interested in looking at English candidates. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next few months plays out.
Yeah, and in terms of the selection criteria, David, Charlotte makes an interesting point there about whether it is an England manager. Jacob Steinberg says there would be a desire in some quarters for England to appoint a homegrown manager. In contrast, in the Telegraph, it talks about being anglicised, so not necessarily English, but with a knowledge of the Premier League, with English players. To your mind, how important does it feel that the next England manager is again English?
I think it will be a high consideration for the FA if Gareth Southgate leaves. And let's touch upon that if, because their priority is for him to stay and they would like him to extend. You saw the stories about a week ago that Gareth Southgate was their preference to continue whether England win the Euros or not. They're in the position that they haven't, but he's under contract until December. So that allows some time for proper calm discussions when the dust has settled on this. And some of the other reports emerging tonight, indicate that Gareth Southgate will speak to the FA before making his final decision. And if we cast our minds back to the Qatar 2022 World Cup, I remember being out there when all the talk in the days after England's defeat to France were, will Gareth Southgate leave? The expectation was he would. He then spoke to the FA and they convinced him to stay and go on until this Euros. There's clearly a temptation to go on until the 2026 World Cup in their mind, will there be in his as well? That's the big question. The power is in his hands. To answer your question specifically, when you look at the likes of Eddie Howe and Graham Potter, they're two really strong candidates. I'll also throw in somebody like Lee Carsley, who's done well with the under-21s. And if Spain are anything to go by, they've shown with De La Fuente that promoting from within is perhaps a sensible way to go, because nobody will know the players that England are going to be using for the next 6, 7, 8 years better than Lee Carsley and, to be fair, Gareth Southgate. And so if you do appoint from outside, you're going to have to acclimatise to the FA, the England DNA, St George's Park, in a very short space of time. We're under 2 years until the 2026 World Cup, and the players seem to be very supportive of Gareth Southgate, at least publicly. If you're looking outside to the likes of a Klopp and a Tuchel, will a German be accepted by the English fans and the people? I don't know. They're both fantastic coaches in their own right, and I think would do a brilliant job. Similar Maurizio Pochettino as an Argentine, it puts a different perspective here. They've all got the character to do it, and you would like to think the communication too. But I think the FA would, in an ideal world, like to stick with an English manager, coach. Although on the women's side, of course, with Serena Wiegmann, they have gone foreign and it's worked out pretty well. So it's a huge decision ahead, and it's not a foregone conclusion, I think, that he's gone, even though that's looking more likely than not at this point in time.
Let's then, Charlotte, touch on one of the names that David just mentioned there, and also appears in Barney Ronay's piece, as I said, entitled FA's Task is Simple, Do Everything to Get Klopp. It's a great idea. How realistic is it?
I mean, he did say he wanted a change of pace, to be honest. I think, didn't he? He said that the Premier League had got too much for him, so maybe international management might be something that he'd consider. But, I mean, at this stage, it just seems a bit of a stretch, doesn't it? To go from Gareth Southgate to Jurgen Klopp, a guy that hasn't got international management under his belt. We know that he obviously has great Premier League experience. So if you go back to that story in the Telegraph in terms of what the FA would look at from an external, as in not an English manager, to come in, he definitely has the credentials in terms of he knows how to nurture English talent. He knows the Premier League. He was well loved over here by probably more than just Liverpool fans. So I think he would probably be well received in some ways, but I feel like there's other candidates on that list that may be a better fit for that England manager role.
One of the things that's been interesting, David, and I've heard it actually a lot over the course of this tournament, is people highlighting the difference between being a club manager and an international manager. If you're around Liverpool, you'll know 2 or 3 sessions a day in pre-season to perfect the sort of gegenpressing that Jurgen Klopp got out of his team. In contrast, as an international manager, he maybe has 10 days, 4 times a year. It's a totally different ball game.
That dynamic is a massive factor. And first and foremost with Jurgen Klopp, I think we need to point out he's already rebuffed an approach from the USA to consider or talk to them about taking over their managerial vacancy ahead of the 2026 World Cup. And he reiterated, or his representatives reiterated, his desire, which he stated on leaving Liverpool, to take a break. And so I don't think England will stand a great chance unless he's going to break that plan in the near future. Of course, maybe if there's a chance of getting Klopp and they want to go for him and he wants it, maybe they would wait. But I think that's an important factor too. But yeah, as you say, the training ground time, the day in, day out interaction, maybe it would suit somebody like Klopp at this point in their career, and his having stepped away from the day-to-day at Liverpool, and clearly it took its toll on him. And he spoke of, being a grandfather and wanting to spend time with his family. Well, international management would allow that. Similar, somebody like Eddie Howe with young boys that he's spoken about publicly in the past, maybe they're at an age where somebody like Howe would like to be in a position to spend more family time. Although Howe seems to love the day-to-day interaction at Newcastle, training a team and playing every weekend and in midweek. And I'm not sure for a young manager like him how compatible and how strong the desire would be to manage at international level. On the flip side, somebody like Graham Potter, who the FA have thought very highly of for a long time, he's available now. So that would presumably be very appealing for them if they're to make a change. Also, money's a factor too. Can the FA afford somebody like Eddie Howe, who will be on much more at Newcastle than the FA would be able to offer him? Similar Klopp when he was at Liverpool, if he was to go to England. Whereas, again, it's different for somebody like Graham Potter. So these are the sort of factors that they'll be thinking through. And yeah, your dynamic that you mentioned there about the differences at international level cannot be underestimated. And we're talking about people here that haven't managed at international level. Whereas when I mentioned somebody like Carsley coming through the system, like De La Fuente, they've already engrossed themselves not only in the people, the processes, the structure, the organization, but that routine of being out of club management and in international management.
Just wanted to pick up on something that David said there, Charlotte, and also intertwine it with the two pieces in The Guardian. Barney's piece says he's like Southgate's cooler, this is about Jurgen Klopp, cooler, taller and more successful cousin, but he's also a proven elite modern coach. And Jacob Steinberg writes, Southgate is thought to be paid about £5 million a year, which is at the lower end of Premier League manager salaries. I mean, we'd quite like that sort of... I know David gets that money, but me and you, Charlotte, would like that one day too. That wage-wise, but also prestige-wise, we obviously all think of England manager as this huge job, but actually for someone perhaps like a Klopp or a Guardiola, being at Liverpool or Manchester City or Real Madrid or Barcelona is a bigger job.
Well, in some ways, yes, but especially because they're not English, are they? I think if you were to ask Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp when they were starting out in their managerial career, what their pinnacle idea would be, I don't think it would be to become England manager, to be honest with you. I think we see them more, don't we, as being club managers. You could see maybe Pep going to somewhere like Spain in the twilight of his years, possibly, but it is this ethereal figure for us, isn't it? As England fans, they're built up. But in fairness to Gareth Southgate, when he came in, it wasn't that he wasn't successful, but he wasn't that big, massive name, was he? And look what he's done. I think everyone's really quick to discredit Gareth Southgate, and a lot of the narrative has been very negative around him this tournament. But it's been 2 finals, a semi-final, a quarter-final. He's taken this England team to levels that many people didn't expect him to be able to do. So I think credit where credit's due. Maybe it's time to move on to one of those names that we've mentioned, but is bringing in a big, massive, mega name like Klopp going to be the difference maker for this England team?
And that is the point, actually, in a lot of the pieces, David, that this is Gareth Southgate's decision, that the FA are keen for him to stay. Mm-hmm. Do you get the sense that the main consideration he will have is this worth the hassle?
Well, Rob, the treatment by sections of the public, the fan base, you saw empty beer cups being thrown at Gareth Southgate at one of the games, and constant criticism and at times ridicule. Of course, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but the way such a good man and a good manager has been treated is appalling. And I think a lot of people sort of should feel sorry about that. Gareth Southgate has transformed England's fortunes. Many of us well aware England didn't qualify for the '94 World Cup. You know, the troubles then under Steve McLaren, that infamous night against Croatia. Even when England have qualified for tournaments over the years, they've failed or struggled to get out of the group stage or far into the knockout phase. And as Charlotte points out, Gareth Southgate has made England a competitive force. The fact that we're, understandably disappointed as England fans not to have won the trophies, having got to the last 2 finals, shows the shift in expectations. And I think we should be applauding the work of Gareth Southgate and the way that he's conducted himself, the dignity and the humility and the class and the way he's handled players and connected with them and made it a joy to come and play for England, which it wasn't at times in the past. And we've heard so many stories of players that didn't fancy meeting up for camps and would claim to have injuries and be pulled out by their club managers. It's sort of the opposite now. They're all eager. They've all been learning and building together. That's tribute to the FA and their pathway that they've put in place in recent years as well. And Southgate's been so key to that. So it's really disappointing to see, some of the reaction. But at the same time, it's a really talented group of players who many of us feel are not fulfilling their potential. They're not playing as well as they could have. They should have got over the line, especially against Italy at the last Euros. So Gareth Southgate has a major decision. Does he want to go through all of this again? Because it has not been pleasant at times, and it has shown the strain during this Euros. And I don't know if he will have the stomach to go on yet again facing it. He's held such a brave face in all of it, but underneath that surface, he will have been hurting. And we know we go into the Nations League in September, and then in the qualifying campaign, and then on to the USA, Canada and Mexico. He seems always to be a bad defeat or a bad performance away from being absolutely barracked, and that's not nice. But at the same time, if the FA can be as persuasive as they want to be, I don't think it's fully decided just yet.
OK, we'll take a quick breather there. A couple more bits and bobs to discuss when we come back, including this in the Times. Emile Smith Rowe is a target for a couple of Arsenal's London rivals. Welcome back to Back Pages. Tonight, David Ornstein and Charlotte Duncker are with us this evening. Let's talk transfers. Emile Smith Rowe, the value of the subject rather of a couple of bids from Fulham and from Crystal Palace. David, you have your finger on the pulse in terms of transfers. Does this feel a little bit like a career that's just stalled a fraction in recent years?
You could say that, but that's largely down to injuries. And I think Emile Smith Rowe has enormous capabilities and potential. There was a very good reason why Arsenal handed him a new long-term contract a couple of years ago, and also the number 10 shirt is because he's an elite talent. And it's a shame that it hasn't quite worked out there for really physical issues. And then it's been quite hard to regain his rhythm and earn selection in Mikel Arteta's team, which is extremely strong. And yeah, it looks like he's going to have to move on to pastures new. It's not set in stone. He's very well thought of at Arsenal, and the bids will need to be right, which clearly they're not so far, because the reports suggest that they've both been rejected, Fulham and Crystal Palace. And either of those clubs or anybody else that might be interested in him will be very fortunate to get a player of this caliber. Aston Villa tried, you'll remember, a couple of years ago before he signed that new contract. And Arsenal now is probably about trying to extract the best possible value. Pure profit as a homegrown player that's come through their academy. If he's to go, they'll be sad to see him leave, but for his career, he needs to be playing regular starting minutes. He's got so much to offer at club and I think international level. So that will be a huge coup for whoever gets him if they do. And Arsenal will hope to get a decent windfall in the process.
Charlotte, that certainly seems like a transfer that you could see happening. Perhaps in contrast, in the Sun, City no to Saudi Ed bid. Manchester City have knocked back a 25 million bid for Edison from Al Nassr. That feels a very strange one, that, to me.
In terms of, you don't think City would let him go, or do you not think that he'd want to go to Saudi?
The former. Well, possibly both, but certainly the former. I know Stefan Ortega came in and did well, and I'm sure City would try and find a replacement, but he's been such an integral part of that amazing success.
Yeah, of course he has, and he's central, as we know, to the way that Manchester City play. We all know that they're pressing and the way they play out from the back, and the way that he's this kind of sweeper keeper, isn't he? And we see him put his head in dangerous positions where most goalkeepers wouldn't even dare. So some of the things he does, I think Manchester City fans have their hands over their eyes in the way that he plays. But you're right, he has been integral to their success. But Pep Guardiola is always of the mindset, if a player wants to go, he's not going to force them to stay at the club. So if he shows any intention to the board and the manager that he wants to leave, then you're right in terms of he's integral, but Pep Guardiola wouldn't stand in his way and would let him go. So City would then look to get the best deal possible that they could for him. He's been there for 7 years. Does he want a change of scenery? Could he go to Saudi and earn even more money? Those are all the sort of questions that are going to be answered. But yeah, it would be a surprise to see them lose their number one keeper. But Ortega has proven to be a brilliant understudy and deputy to him? Could he step up and be number one, or would they look to reinvest that money back in the squad in the goalkeeping department if he does leave?
And I think Charlotte touched on it there, David. I think it's canny knack of you think that a big player is leaving. How will they cope without İlkay Gundogan? How will they cope without someone else? But they always find a way. I mean, people will say the way they find a way is because they've got very deep pockets, but the succession planning is very good.
Yeah, Manchester City haven't spent extraordinary amounts in or that much more than some of their rivals in recent years. It was the earlier investment that was really quite heavy. And now it's actually been quite sustainable when you see the likes of Sterling, Jesus, Zinchenko departing. And this might be another example of that. If the Saudi bid reaches a suitable level, City have been really impressive on their trading. And so absolutely, you'd back them. And as long as Pep Guardiola's at the club to be better for it, or at least as good, and remain, in contention for all the trophies. It is a bit of a strange one because we're used to seeing players who are at their peak continuing in divisions such as the Premier League, but the Saudi Pro League has been the great disruptor over the last year. And okay, it's going to be a different summer there now. They're going to go for what looks like a sprinkling of top players as opposed to a complete flood of them, because most of the squads are full now. But it would be a bit of a shock to see Ederson leave, although I have heard these rumblings for several months now. So perhaps this situation has been brewing for a while for whatever reason. And the finances, if they work out well, I don't doubt that City will get themselves back into contention for pretty much every trophy again next season.
Just onto the Lionesses, Charlotte, on the eye, Leah Williamson says refusing to let men's Euro woe cloud their focus, as well they shouldn't. At the start of their campaign, they were made slightly heavy weather of it, but nearly there now, England.
Yeah, a point away to Sweden tomorrow would obviously guarantee their qualification for Euro 2025. They definitely don't want to lose, because then they've got to go through 2 more qualification games to get there in the autumn period, to get there next year. But you're right in terms of Leah Williamson saying they're not going to be distracted by what the men are doing. They know what it takes to win a Euros. They know what it takes to qualify. These are proven winners in that women's team. I'm sure, despite what you say, they've made a bit of heavy weather with that group trying to get through. But a point tomorrow, we'll see them definitely qualify for next summer's tournament.
Very quickly, Dave, it's only got about 20 seconds left, but interesting. Rory McIlroy getting words of wisdom from Rafa Nadal and Michael Jordan.
Name dropper extraordinaire, and he needs it, because it's 10 years now without a major title, and he'll want to bounce back. He'll have big support at this coming Open, and it was a pretty devastating defeat or losing out there, but he has spoken very well in that interview about his mindset coming into the Open, and you wouldn't back against him being in contention again.
OK, thank you very much, both of you, for joining us